My roommate's harmless prank sent me into a coma for 6 years, and now I'm coming for my revenge. The neurologist's words echoed in the sterile hospital room like a death sentence wrapped in medical jargon. 6 years. I'd lost 6 years of my life because Trevor thought it would be funny to spike my protein shake with GHB at our graduation party. The drug interaction with my undiagnosed heart condition had stopped my breathing long enough to cause severe brain damage. My mother sat beside the bed, aged a decade beyond her years, her hand trembling as she gripped mine. She'd spent 190 days visiting a son who couldn't recognize her face, couldn't speak his own name, couldn't remember that he'd been accepted to Columbia Law School the day before Trevor decided a prank would make everyone laugh. Physical therapy started the morning after I woke up. My legs had forgotten how to walk. My hands couldn't grip a pencil. The therapist, a woman named Keisha with infinite patience, guided my trembling fingers through basic exercises while I fought tears of frustration. She explained that my brain had to relearn pathways that had been severed by oxygen deprivation. Simple tasks felt impossible. Brushing my teeth required concentration that left me exhausted. Getting dressed took an hour. I was 24 years old with the motor skills of a toddler, and somewhere out there, Trevor was living the life that should have been mine. My younger sister Vanessa arrived with a laptop and 6 years of accumulated information. She'd kept everything. News articles about the incident, social media posts from the party, photos of Trevor's life progression, while I lay motionless in a hospital bed. He'd graduated from state with my intended degree. He'd gotten engaged to Melissa, the girl I'd been dating before the coma. He'd landed an associate position at a corporate firm downtown. Every milestone he'd achieved was built on the foundation of my destroyed future, and nobody had held him accountable because the prosecutors deemed it an accident. An unfortunate reaction to a harmless prank gone wrong. The anger came slowly at first, then all at once, like a dam breaking. I threw the laptop across the room, watching it shatter against the wall while Vanessa jumped back. My mother appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of relief that I was showing emotion and terror at what that emotion might become. She tried explaining that revenge wouldn't change anything, that I needed to focus on recovery and rebuilding my life, but she hadn't spent 6 years trapped in darkness while the person responsible walked free. She hadn't missed her father's funeral, her grandmother's last birthday, her own college graduation. Trevor had stolen my entire 20s, and the legal system had given him a slap on the wrist and probation. Insurance had covered the medical costs, but my parents had sold their house to afford the specialized rehabilitation facility. They'd moved into a cramped apartment across town, liquidated their retirement savings, and taken second jobs to pay for treatments that insurance deemed experimental. My father looked hollowed out, his eyes sunken from night shifts driving for a rideshare company after working his day job as an accountant. Every physical therapy session, every cognitive test, every consultation with specialists cost money they didn't have. Meanwhile, Trevor posted vacation photos from Cabo on Instagram, living in a luxury apartment his corporate salary easily covered. Vanessa had become my unofficial investigator during my coma. She documented everything with the methodical precision of someone who understood that justice delayed might still arrive eventually. Her files contained Trevor's complete timeline. His social media posts showed him partying weeks after I'd flatlined, making jokes about lightweight friends who couldn't handle their liquor. He'd never visited the hospital, never apologized to my family, never acknowledged that his prank had consequences beyond an awkward moment. His wedding registry sat online, requesting expensive kitchen appliances and honeymoon contributions, while my parents ate ramen to afford my medications. The cognitive therapist, Dr. Okonkwo, worked with me on memory reconstruction and executive function. He explained that my brain damage was permanent but manageable with proper training and support. I'd never have the quick recall I'd possessed before the incident. Complex reasoning would always require extra effort, but I could relearn, adapt, and build new neural pathways around the damaged areas. He seemed impressed by my progress until I mentioned wanting to finish my law degree. His expression shifted to something resembling pity mixed with professional concern. Law school required cognitive abilities I might never fully recover. Perhaps I should consider alternative career paths. The suggestion felt like another theft. I'd spent 4 years working toward law school, maintaining a perfect GPA while working 2 jobs to minimize student loans. I'd aced the LSAT on my first attempt. Columbia had offered a partial scholarship. My future had been crystalline in its clarity, and Trevor had shattered it with a chemical he'd ordered online for $50, because he thought watching people pass out was entertaining. The police report called it reckless endangerment. The prosecutor accepted a plea deal for misdemeanor charges. Trevor served 90 days in county jail and 3 years probation. My sentence was life. Physical recovery took 8 months of brutal work. Relearning to walk meant falling dozens of times daily. Muscle memory was a lie told to people who'd never had their brains rewired by hypoxia. Every movement required conscious thought. Every step was a calculation. Keisha pushed me hard, refusing to accept my limitations even when I begged for breaks. She'd worked with traumatic brain injury patients for 15 years and recognized the difference between can't and won't. My body could relearn movement. My brain could rebuild connections, but only if I stopped treating my condition as a permanent prison and started viewing it as a challenge to overcome. The day I walked unassisted to the hospital cafeteria, my mother cried. Not tears of joy, but something deeper and more complicated. Relief that I'd survived mixed with grief for the son she'd lost. I wasn't the same person who'd gone to that graduation party. That version of me had died on Trevor's apartment floor, while partygoers assumed I was just sleeping off too much alcohol. This new version was harder, angrier, focused with an intensity that made people uncomfortable. Dr. Okonkwo called it trauma response. I called it clarity. Vanessa's investigation had uncovered something the police had missed or ignored. Trevor had spiked drinks at previous parties. She'd found 3 other victims through social media groups dedicated to party safety awareness. A girl named Destiny had woken up in a hospital after Trevor's sophomore year party with no memory of the previous 6 hours. A guy named Marcus had experienced severe reactions at a different party where Trevor had been present. Another woman refused to be named but confirmed she'd suspected something in her drink at one of Trevor's gatherings. None had pressed charges because they couldn't prove anything, and Trevor's family had money for lawyers who made accusation costly. I spent weeks reading every legal document Vanessa had collected. The police report was a masterpiece of minimization. Officers had treated the incident as an accidental overdose rather than a potential assault. Witness statements were taken hours after the party, when memories had already been contaminated by alcohol and shock. The toxicology report clearly showed GHB in my system, but the investigation never established how it got there. Trevor's statement claimed someone else must have spiked the drinks, that he'd been as shocked as everyone when I collapsed. His friends corroborated his story with suspicious uniformity. The prosecutor's file was even more enraging. The assistant district attorney assigned to my case had barely graduated law school himself. His notes suggested he'd viewed the incident as a tragic accident between friends who'd been drinking at a party. He'd accepted Trevor's plea deal without consulting my family or pushing for harsher charges. The investigation had never explored Trevor's pattern of behavior or contacted other potential victims. It was easier to close the case quickly than pursue justice thoroughly. My life had been reduced to a line item in some overworked prosecutor's caseload. Dr. Okonkwo connected me with a support group for traumatic brain injury survivors. The weekly meetings happened in a church basement that smelled like old coffee and industrial cleaner. 7 other people attended regularly, each with their own story of how everything changed in an instant. A construction worker who'd fallen from scaffolding, a teenager hit by a drunk driver, a veteran with blast injuries from Afghanistan. We shared strategies for managing cognitive deficits and emotional volatility, but none of them understood what it meant to lose 6 years to someone else's entertainment. My mother kept suggesting I let it go, that dwelling on revenge would poison my recovery. She'd read articles about forgiveness being essential for healing, about how holding grudges damaged the person carrying them more than the target. Easy philosophy for someone who hadn't lost everything. Easy words from someone whose brain still worked the way it was designed to work. She meant well, but her platitudes felt like pressure to accept injustice quietly, because fighting back might be uncomfortable for everyone watching. Vanessa had no such reservations. She'd spent 6 years watching Trevor thrive while our family struggled, and her anger matched mine in intensity, if not focus. She started mapping Trevor's current life with the same meticulous detail she'd applied to documenting his past. His apartment building was downtown, 3 blocks from his office. He walked to work every morning at 7:30, stopped at the same coffee shop, and took the same route. His routines were predictable, his security practically non-existent. He'd gotten comfortable in his unpunished freedom. The cognitive rehabilitation exercises included memory training and executive function development. I spent hours working through puzzles designed for brain injury patients, feeling my damaged neurons slowly forging new connections. Dr. Okonkwo explained neuroplasticity, how the brain could rewire itself given proper stimulation and time. He showed me brain scans illustrating how alternate pathways could compensate for damaged regions. But he also warned that some functions might never fully return. Complex legal reasoning, rapid information processing, verbal fluency under pressure, these were abilities I'd need for law school and abilities I might never regain. I applied to Columbia Law anyway. My undergraduate transcripts were still excellent. My LSAT scores hadn't expired. I wrote an admissions essay about resilience and overcoming obstacles that barely scratched the surface of my actual experience. The acceptance letter arrived 3 months later, with a note about considering their disability services office for accommodations. They were offering me a chance to reclaim my stolen future, and I intended to take it despite Dr. Okonkwo's skepticism about my readiness. Trevor's engagement photos appeared on Facebook like a personal insult. He and Melissa posed on a beach at sunset, her ring catching the light while his arm wrapped around her waist. She'd visited me exactly once during the coma, crying about how sorry she was while making it clear she was moving on. I didn't blame her for that. 6 years was an unreasonable time to wait for someone who might never wake up, but watching her smile at Trevor, knowing he'd comforted her after destroying me, added another layer to my burning resentment. Physical therapy graduation meant I could walk, climb stairs, and manage basic motor skills independently. Keisha hugged me at our final session, making me promise to continue the exercises at home and to pursue my goals despite the obstacles. She'd seen hundreds of TBI patients give up when recovery got hard, and she took personal pride in the ones who persevered. I left the rehabilitation center with a folder full of exercises and a burning need to prove that Trevor hadn't broken me permanently. Vanessa discovered Trevor's bachelor party plans through his best man's public Instagram story. They were planning a weekend in Vegas, staying at the Bellagio, with plans for clubs and gambling. The same kind of party atmosphere where Trevor had ended my life, now recreated as celebration of his upcoming marriage. The cosmic injustice of it made my hands shake with barely controlled rage. He'd learned nothing, faced no consequences that changed his behavior. The 90 days in county jail had been a minor inconvenience in his otherwise upward trajectory. I started following Trevor's routine personally once my physical recovery allowed independent mobility. The coffee shop he frequented was called Brewster's, a trendy place with expensive espresso drinks and artisanal pastries. He ordered the same thing every morning: large Americano, 2 shots, room for cream. He chatted with the barista, a young woman named Ashley, who clearly found him charming. He tipped well and made jokes that made her laugh. To everyone who interacted with him casually, Trevor was a successful, friendly young attorney with a bright future. None of them knew about the body he'd left in his wake. Columbia Law's Disability Services Office assigned me a counselor named Stephanie, who specialized in supporting students with TBI. She explained accommodation options, extended time on exams, note-taking assistance, reduced course loads, flexible deadlines. I rejected most of them. Accepting accommodations felt like admitting Trevor had won, that I was damaged goods who needed special treatment. Stephanie tried explaining that accommodations weren't admissions of weakness, but tools for leveling an uneven playing field. I told her I'd manage without them, and immediately regretted the pride that made me refuse help. The first semester at Columbia nearly destroyed what remained of my cognitive function. Reading cases took 3 times longer than my classmates required. My notes were scattered and incomplete because my processing speed couldn't keep up with professors' lectures. Cold calling in class became torture as I struggled to articulate thoughts that my brain could grasp, but my mouth couldn't properly express. Other students whispered about the older guy who'd taken a gap year and couldn't hack the pressure. None knew I'd spent that gap year in a coma because someone thought drugging people was entertaining. Vanessa got a job at a private investigation firm that specialized in background checks and asset searches. Her boss, a former police detective named Raymond Cross, took interest in my case when she mentioned it during her interview. He'd worked plenty of drugging cases during his career and recognized the pattern in Trevor's behavior. Raymond offered to help unofficially, using his connections and resources to build a more complete picture of Trevor's activities. He couldn't promise anything criminal would be uncovered, but he suspected that people who drugged others at parties rarely did it just once. Trevor's wedding was scheduled for June at a vineyard upstate. The venue's website showcased photos of previous ceremonies, couples kissing under arbors while surrounded by rolling hills and grapevines. The price for booking was listed at $15,000 before catering and extras. Trevor's corporate salary was good, but that kind of expense suggested family money helping fund the celebration. Meanwhile, my parents were still paying off medical bills that would follow them into retirement. The disparity felt obscene. Raymond's investigation uncovered financial records that painted an interesting picture. Trevor's father owned a chain of car dealerships across 3 states, successful enough to afford expensive lawyers when needed. The family had quietly settled 2 other incidents involving Trevor during his college years. One involved property damage at a fraternity party. Another involved allegations of drink tampering that never went to trial. The family's pattern was clear: throw money at problems until they disappeared. My case had been different only because brain damage couldn't be settled with a check and a non-disclosure agreement. I failed my first-year contracts exam despite studying until my brain felt like it was melting. The professor's comments suggested I'd understood the concepts, but failed to apply them coherently under pressure. My answer had been disorganized, missing key analysis, and demonstrating the kind of cognitive deficits that Dr. Okonkwo had warned would be permanent. Sitting in Stephanie's office afterward, I finally accepted that pride wouldn't carry me through law school. I needed accommodations. I needed help. I needed to acknowledge that Trevor had taken something I couldn't simply will back into existence. Extended time on exams helped, but only marginally. My brain still worked slower than required for the volume of material law school demanded. Note-takers helped me capture information I missed during lectures. But the fundamental problem remained. Complex legal reasoning under pressure was exactly the cognitive function most damaged by hypoxic brain injury. I was trying to run a marathon with a broken leg, and accommodations were just better crutches. Vanessa's investigation took a turn when Raymond connected with someone from Trevor's past. A woman named Brittany had dated Trevor during his sophomore year and had experienced a frightening incident at one of his parties. She'd woken up in a hospital with no memory of how she got there, her blood showing elevated levels of sedatives she'd never taken. Trevor had insisted she must have accidentally taken something, playing the concerned boyfriend while never quite explaining what happened. After they broke up, Brittany heard rumors from other women about similar experiences at Trevor's parties. Raymond interviewed Brittany over coffee recording her statement with permission. She described a pattern that matched what Vanessa had already uncovered. Trevor hosted parties where drinks sometimes had unexpected effects. He always had plausible deniability. Maybe someone brought bad substances. Maybe people mixed medications with alcohol. Maybe lightweight drinkers couldn't handle the environment. Brittany had suspected Trevor was systematically drugging women to make them vulnerable, but she'd had no proof, and his family's lawyers had made threatening noises about defamation when she'd mentioned her suspicions to mutual friends. The spring semester brought new challenges and a clearer understanding of my limitations. Constitutional law required rapid analysis of complex precedents and fact patterns. My damaged brain couldn't process information at the required speed. Criminal procedure involved memorization and application of detailed rules with numerous exceptions. My memory deficits made consistent recall impossible. Legal writing demanded clear communication of intricate arguments. My verbal fluency issues translated to written work that professors described as confused and poorly structured. I was failing out of the law school I'd fought 6 years to reach. Trevor's bachelor party weekend in Vegas was documented extensively on social media. His friends posted photos and videos of clubs, gambling tables, and drunken revelry. Trevor appeared in several shots, drink in hand, laughing and celebrating his upcoming marriage. One video showed him at a blackjack table, confidently doubling down while his friends cheered. The caption read, "Last weekend of freedom for the legend." The comments were full of congratulations and jokes about married life. Nobody mentioned the guy who'd spent 6 years in a coma because of Trevor's idea of fun. Raymond's investigation uncovered the real breakthrough through an unlikely source. Trevor's former roommate from college, a guy named Devin, had been wrestling with guilt for years. He'd been at the graduation party when I collapsed. He'd watched Trevor slip something into my protein shake while I was in the bathroom. Devin had assumed it was a harmless prank, something that would make me drowsy or giggly, not literally kill me. When I'd stopped breathing, Devin had panicked and left the party before police arrived. He'd spent 6 years knowing he was a witness to what amounted to assault, too cowardly to come forward because Trevor's family had money for lawsuits. Devin agreed to meet with Raymond at a diner outside the city. Vanessa and I sat in Raymond's car in the parking lot, watching through the window as Devin hunched over coffee, his hands shaking. Raymond recorded the conversation on his phone, legally permissible in our state. Devin's statement was devastating. He described watching Trevor carefully measure powder from a small vial, explaining to nearby friends that he was going to make me experience the ultimate relaxation as a graduation gift. Trevor had been laughing when he stirred the substance into my shake. He'd been laughing when I collapsed. He'd only stopped laughing when the paramedics said I wasn't breathing. Devin's guilt had eaten away at him for years. He'd considered coming forward multiple times, but feared the legal and social consequences. Trevor's family had made it clear that anyone causing problems would face expensive litigation. Devin wasn't wealthy. He worked as a middle manager at a tech company, married with 2 kids, terrified of losing everything to defend a truth that might not even change the outcome. But watching Trevor's wedding preparations while knowing he'd never faced real consequences had finally broken through Devin's self-preservation instinct. I listened to Raymond's recording 3 times in his car, my hands gripping the dashboard until my knuckles went white. Devin's testimony proved premeditation. Trevor hadn't accidentally spiked my drink. He'd deliberately calculated a dose, announced his intentions to witnesses, and administered a substance he knew was powerful enough to incapacitate someone. This wasn't a prank gone wrong. This was assault with a deadly weapon. And the original investigation had missed or ignored every witness who could have confirmed it. The statute of limitations for assault had expired, but Raymond pointed out something interesting. Attempted murder in our state had a longer window, and my 6-year coma could potentially extend that timeline under certain legal theories. More importantly, new evidence of premeditation could reopen the criminal case if a prosecutor could be convinced to pursue it. The original plea deal had been based on incomplete investigation and Trevor's lies. Devin's testimony could unravel everything. I brought Devin's statement to the district attorney's office. The receptionist made me wait 2 hours before informing me that the assistant DA who'd handled my case no longer worked there. The current ADA assigned to review old cases was named Lydia Torres, a woman in her 40s with a reputation for taking cold cases seriously. She listened to Devin's recording without interrupting, her expression hardening as the testimony progressed. When it finished, she asked why Devin had waited 6 years to come forward. I explained about Trevor's family and their legal threats. Lydia made notes and said she'd review the original case file. Law school was becoming untenable. My second semester grades arrived with a note from the dean suggesting I consider taking a leave of absence to address my health issues. 3 of my 4 classes showed grades below passing. The 4th was barely acceptable. My academic standing was probationary, meaning another poor semester would result in dismissal. The dream I'd fought to reclaim was slipping away despite accommodations, despite determination, despite spending every waking hour trying to force my damaged brain to function at the level required for legal education. Trevor's wedding countdown continued with irritating social media regularity. Melissa posted photos of dress shopping with bridesmaids. Trevor shared pictures of his rented tuxedo and groomsmen gifts. The venue posted promotional content featuring their wedding as an upcoming event. Everything proceeded toward celebration, while my life continued its slow collapse. The unfairness of it made simple breathing feel like an act of defiance. Lydia Torres called me directly 3 weeks after our meeting. Her investigation into the original case had revealed troubling patterns. The responding officers had failed to properly secure the scene. Witness statements had been taken informally without proper documentation. The toxicology report had been filed, but never thoroughly analyzed. Most damning, the assistant DA who'd accepted Trevor's plea deal had notes indicating pressure from supervisors to resolve the case quickly without dragging it through trial. The whole investigation reeked of corners cut and justice deferred. Raymond uncovered 2 more victims through his connections. A woman named Tasha had attended one of Trevor's parties during his senior year and had woken up with no memory of several hours. A man named Justin had experienced a similar incident at a different gathering Trevor hosted. Both had suspected their drinks were tampered with but hadn't reported it because they couldn't prove anything, and Trevor's reputation as a nice guy made accusations seem ridiculous. Raymond documented both statements carefully, building a pattern of behavior that prosecutors couldn't ignore. Lydia met with Devin personally to verify his testimony and assess his credibility as a witness. Devin brought text messages from the night of the party, conversations with friends discussing what Trevor had done and debating whether to tell police. The messages proved multiple people had known about Trevor's actions and stayed silent. Lydia's expression during our follow-up meeting suggested prosecutorial outrage. She'd spent 15 years dealing with cases where victims suffered because witnesses stayed silent, and this one clearly triggered personal fury. The wedding was 2 months away when Lydia filed charges. Not the misdemeanor nonsense from the original plea deal, but attempted murder charges based on new evidence and witness testimony. The arrest warrant was executed at Trevor's office on a Thursday morning. Vanessa had positioned herself across the street with a camera, capturing Trevor's expression as officers led him out in handcuffs. His face showed pure shock. He'd believed he was untouchable. 6 years had convinced him that his family's money and lawyers had permanently buried his crime. Trevor's family hired a defense attorney named Marcus Sheffield, a man known for getting wealthy clients acquitted through aggressive tactics and jury manipulation. Sheffield immediately filed motions to dismiss, arguing that new charges violated double jeopardy principles since Trevor had already pleaded guilty to related offenses. Lydia countered that the original charges had been based on incomplete investigation and that attempted murder was a distinct crime from reckless endangerment. The judge scheduled a hearing to determine if the case could proceed. My parents attended the preliminary hearing with expressions mixing hope and exhaustion. They'd spent 6 years watching Trevor live freely while I struggled to relearn basic functions. Sitting in that courtroom felt like the first time anyone in authority had actually listened to what happened. Lydia presented Devin's testimony, the additional victim statements Raymond had collected, an expert analysis of the original toxicology report showing GHB levels consistent with deliberate overdose rather than recreational use. Sheffield attacked Devin's credibility viciously. Why had he waited 6 years? What motivated him to suddenly come forward now? Wasn't it convenient that this testimony emerged just as his old friend was getting married and moving on with his life? Devin held firm under cross-examination, explaining his fear of Trevor's family and their legal threats. He maintained that watching Trevor celebrate while I remained damaged had finally broken through his cowardice. The judge found his testimony credible enough to let the case proceed to trial. Trevor made bail at $2 million, posted by his father within hours of the hearing. He was released with conditions: no contact with witnesses, surrender of passport, electronic monitoring. Sheffield gave a statement to media calling the charges a miscarriage of justice, claiming Trevor had already paid for his mistake and that prosecutors were being vindictive. Lydia responded with a statement about justice delayed, not meaning justice denied, and emphasized that new evidence required proper review, regardless of time passed. I withdrew from Columbia the same week Trevor was arraigned. My dean was understanding, noting that my circumstances were extraordinary and that the door would remain open if I wanted to reapply after the trial. Stephanie from Disability Services hugged me and made me promise to take care of my mental health. Dr. Okonkwo called to check in, reminding me that cognitive recovery wasn't linear and that setbacks didn't erase progress. But walking away from law school felt like another theft. Another thing Trevor had stolen by spiking my drink 6 years ago. The trial preparation consumed months. Lydia was building a comprehensive case showing Trevor's pattern of drugging people for entertainment. Devin testified before the grand jury. Raymond's additional victims gave statements. Expert witnesses analyzed the original toxicology report and explained how GHB dosing worked. Medical professionals documented my brain damage and its correlation to oxygen deprivation from drug-induced respiratory failure. Every piece of evidence pointed toward Trevor deliberately administering a dangerous substance without regard for consequences. Trevor's defense strategy became clear during discovery. Sheffield would argue that I'd taken GHB voluntarily, possibly mixed with other substances, and that Trevor had tried to help when I'd overdosed. He'd claimed Devin's testimony was fabricated, motivated by jealousy or financial incentive. He'd suggest that the other victims had made mistakes with their own substance use and were blaming Trevor to avoid personal responsibility. He'd paint Trevor as a successful young man being destroyed by vindictive prosecution. Melissa canceled the wedding 3 weeks before the scheduled date. She posted a statement on social media about needing time to process revelations about Trevor's past and to prioritize her own well-being. The comments section exploded with support for her decision and condemnation of Trevor. Several women shared their own stories of suspicious incidents at parties Trevor had attended. The social media pile-on was brutal and completely outside my control. I'd wanted justice through the legal system, but the court of public opinion had reached its own verdict. Trevor's father tried reaching out through intermediaries, suggesting a financial settlement in exchange for my family, asking prosecutors to drop charges. The offer was substantial. $2 million, all medical bills covered, a public apology from Trevor. Lydia explained that I couldn't drop criminal charges even if I wanted to. The state was prosecuting, not me personally. My father wanted to hear the offer details anyway. We were drowning in medical debt, and $2 million would change our lives. I refused to even consider it. Money couldn't buy back 6 years. Money couldn't repair my damaged brain. Money couldn't erase what Trevor had done. The trial began on a Monday in late September. Jury selection took 2 days, as Sheffield eliminated anyone who seemed sympathetic to drug crime victims. The final jury was 8 women and 4 men, ranging from mid-20s to retirement age. Lydia's opening statement was concise. Trevor Austin had deliberately drugged multiple people over several years for his own entertainment, and one of those people had nearly died as a result. Sheffield's opening painted Trevor as a young man whose single mistake had been blown out of proportion by prosecutorial overreach. Devin testified on day 3. He walked through his memory of the graduation party, describing in detail how Trevor had measured powder, mixed it into my protein shake, and laughed about giving me the ultimate relaxation. Under cross-examination, Sheffield hammered him about waiting 6 years to come forward and suggested he was lying to get attention or money. Devin stayed calm, explaining again about fear of Trevor's family and their legal threats. Several jurors took notes during his testimony. 2 looked visibly angry. Tasha testified about her experience at one of Trevor's parties. She described waking up in a hospital with no memory of hours missing from her night. Sheffield objected repeatedly, arguing that Tasha's incident was unrelated to my case and prejudicial. The judge allowed the testimony as evidence of a pattern. Justin followed with a similar story. By the time 3 additional witnesses had testified about suspicious incidents at Trevor's parties, the pattern was unmistakable even to skeptical observers. My testimony was scheduled for day 5. Lydia prepared me carefully, warning that Sheffield would try to rattle me and exploit my cognitive deficits. She coached me to take my time answering questions, to admit when I didn't remember something, and to focus on facts rather than emotions. Walking to the witness stand felt surreal. Trevor sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, his expression carefully neutral. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw something there. Not remorse, but annoyance at being held accountable. Lydia walked me through my background, my academic achievements before the coma, my acceptance to Columbia Law School. She established what my life trajectory had been before Trevor's prank. Then she guided me through my memory of the graduation party, arriving at Trevor's apartment, socializing with friends, making a protein shake because I was driving later. I had no memory of what happened after drinking that shake. The next clear memory was waking up 6 years later in a hospital bed with my mother holding my hand. Sheffield's cross-examination was brutal. He suggested I'd taken drugs voluntarily and was blaming Trevor because I regretted my choices. He pointed out that I'd had a beer at the party before making my protein shake. He insinuated that I'd mixed substances stupidly and was now trying to profit from my own poor decisions. Lydia objected frequently, but Sheffield's questions planted seeds of doubt. I struggled to maintain composure as he twisted my words and exploited my slow processing speed to make me seem confused or unreliable. The medical testimony was devastating in my favor. A neurologist explained exactly how GHB-induced respiratory failure had caused my brain damage. A toxicologist testified that the GHB levels in my system were consistent with deliberate overdose, not recreational use. A pharmacologist explained that mixing GHB with alcohol was extremely dangerous and that anyone with basic knowledge of the drug would know this. Expert after expert established that Trevor's actions had directly caused my 6-year coma and permanent cognitive impairment. Trevor took the stand in his own defense, a risky move that Sheffield likely advised against. Trevor testified that he'd never drugged anyone, that Devin was lying, and that I must have obtained GHB from another source. He claimed he'd tried to help when I collapsed, calling 911 and performing CPR until paramedics arrived. Under Lydia's cross-examination, his story fell apart. She confronted him with his own social media posts from the days following my collapse. Posts joking about friends who couldn't handle their liquor. Posts showing him partying while I fought for my life. His explanation sounded hollow even to my damaged hearing. Closing arguments happened on a Friday. Lydia methodically walked through every piece of evidence. Devin's eyewitness testimony, the pattern of other victims, the medical proof of deliberate overdose, Trevor's lack of remorse. She emphasized that this wasn't about a prank gone wrong, but about a pattern of dangerous behavior that had finally resulted in catastrophic consequences. Sheffield argued reasonable doubt, suggesting that the state hadn't proven beyond certainty that Trevor had spiked my drink. He pointed to gaps in the evidence and painted Devon as an unreliable witness with ulterior motives. The jury deliberated for 11 hours across 2 days. Vanessa, my parents, and I waited in the courthouse cafeteria, unable to eat or focus on anything else. Raymond stopped by to offer support, reminding us that regardless of verdict, we'd exposed Trevor's pattern and prevented future victims. Lydia seemed confident but cautious, explaining that juries were unpredictable and that even strong cases sometimes resulted in acquittals. The verdict came back guilty on all counts: attempted murder, multiple counts of assault for the other victims who'd testified, and conspiracy charges related to his pattern of drugging people. Trevor's face drained of color as the jury foreman read each guilty verdict. His father stood up from the gallery and walked out. Melissa, sitting in the back row, cried quietly. Sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. Trevor remained out on bail, but with stricter monitoring conditions. Those 6 weeks felt longer than the entire trial. My family tried returning to normal life, but everything felt suspended until sentencing. Would Trevor get a slap on the wrist like before? Would his family's money buy leniency? Lydia warned us that even with conviction, judges had discretion in sentencing, and that first-time offenders sometimes received lighter sentences than victims wanted. The sentencing hearing brought victim impact statements. My mother testified about watching her son lie motionless for 6 years, about selling their house and bankrupting their retirement to afford my care. My father described working multiple jobs and still drowning in medical debt. Vanessa talked about losing her big brother during crucial years of her own development. I spoke last, describing how Trevor had stolen my entire 20s and left me with permanent brain damage that would affect every aspect of my remaining life. Trevor's family brought their own witnesses. His mother tearfully describing him as a good boy who'd made mistakes, his former professors praising his potential, his employer vouching for his character. Sheffield argued for leniency, noting that Trevor had already lost his job, his fiancée, and his reputation. He suggested probation and community service rather than prison time. The ask was obscene. Trevor had nearly killed me and shown no remorse, and his lawyer wanted him to walk free. The judge was a black woman in her 60s named Harriet Douglas, known for being tough but fair. She'd listened to every minute of testimony without visible emotion. When everyone finished speaking, she took 15 minutes reviewing her notes before announcing sentence. Her voice was steady and cold. 18 years in state prison on the attempted murder charge, consecutive sentences for the assault charges, bringing total prison time to 24 years. Trevor would be eligible for parole after serving 85% of his sentence. Trevor collapsed at the defense table. His mother screamed. Sheffield immediately announced plans to appeal. But Judge Douglas wasn't finished. She addressed Trevor directly, explaining that his pattern of drugging people for entertainment showed fundamental disregard for human life, and that his lack of remorse demonstrated he'd likely continue the behavior if released. She noted that his victim had lost 6 years to unconsciousness and would live with brain damage forever, while Trevor would eventually have a chance at freedom. The sentence was severe, but proportional to the harm caused. Bailiffs led Trevor out in handcuffs while his family sobbed in the gallery. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed us for reactions. Lydia gave a statement about justice being served and emphasized that victims of drug-facilitated assault should come forward regardless of time passed. My mother simply said she was grateful that Trevor would face consequences for what he'd done. I didn't speak to reporters. Vanessa drove us home in silence, the weight of 6 years of fighting finally lifting. 3 months later, I returned to Columbia Law School. The dean personally welcomed me back, noting that my case had brought national attention to issues of drug-facilitated assault and prosecutorial diligence in investigating party incidents. Stephanie helped me develop a realistic accommodation plan that acknowledged my limitations while supporting my goals. Dr. Okonkwo celebrated my decision to continue pursuing my dreams despite obstacles. Law school was still brutally difficult. My brain damage hadn't disappeared with Trevor's conviction. I still processed information slower than classmates, still struggled with complex reasoning, still needed extended time on exams. But the anger that had fueled my recovery transformed into determined focus. Every late night studying, every difficult exam, every small victory represented proof that Trevor hadn't destroyed me completely. He'd stolen 6 years and damaged my brain, but he hadn't killed my spirit or my capacity to fight for what I'd earned. Graduation came 4 years later, delayed, but achieved. My family filled 3 rows in the auditorium. Vanessa screamed when they called my name. Dr. Okonkwo attended as my guest, wiping tears during the ceremony. Keisha sent flowers with a note saying she'd always known I'd finish what I started. Raymond sent congratulations with copies of news articles about how my case had led to reformed policies on investigating drug-facilitated assaults. The accomplishment felt sweeter for how hard I'd fought to reach it. Trevor's appeal failed. His sentence stood. His father stopped funding appeals after the second rejection, finally accepting that money couldn't fix everything. Trevor would serve his time in a maximum security facility upstate. Devon had visited him once in prison, seeking forgiveness for his testimony. Trevor had refused to see him. Some people never learn. 5 years after graduation, I opened a practice specializing in representing victims of drug-facilitated assault and advocating for criminal justice reform. My brain damage remained permanent, requiring careful workload management and strategic use of accommodations. But my experience made me uniquely positioned to understand clients who'd lost time to unconsciousness and faced systems that minimized their suffering. I hired Vanessa as my investigator. She was still the best at finding evidence everyone else missed. Trevor became eligible for parole after 20 years. My victim impact statement opposing his release was 50 pages long, documenting every way his actions continued affecting my life decades later. The parole board denied his application. He'd shown no genuine remorse, participated minimally in rehabilitation programs, and demonstrated concerning behavior toward other inmates. He'd serve his full sentence. I never forgot the 6 years Trevor stole, but I refused to let that theft define the decades that followed. Every client I helped represented partial victory over what he'd tried to do. Every successful prosecution of someone who'd drugged another person meant one less victim in a hospital bed. Justice hadn't erased my trauma or restored my lost time, but it had given me purpose beyond revenge. Sometimes the best comeback is simply refusing to let the person who hurt you stop you from living. Thanks for hanging out till the end. If you want more stories, make sure to subscribe and leave your take below.